There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining. Well, you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful. All right. And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
Quentin Tarantino just roasted modern Hollywood in a funny and fiery interview with the outspoken Bill Maher, and it was seriously entertaining. The legendary director didn't hold back as he called out his biggest critics, labeling them as fake virtue signalers and woke hypocrites, while Maher added his own sharp and bold comments to the mix. If you enjoy fearless and unfiltered political talk, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss moments like this.
Before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
We all know Bill Maher never hides his dislike for Hollywood's obsession with woke. I've talked about it many times on this channel, how the industry has swapped real storytelling for virtue signaling and deep meaning for trending hashtags. But what's really interesting is that even in Hollywood's thick cloud of one-sided thinking, a few voices still stand out. And one of the strongest is Quentin Tarantino. Even Maher, who's usually harsh on Hollywood, respects him because Tarantino stays true to his old-school style. He doesn't pander, doesn't preach, and definitely hasn't been taken over by the woke mindset. He still makes movies that push boundaries and make people think, instead of just making them feel safe, and he doesn't care about pleasing today's ideological gatekeepers. In a world where most creatives are scared to step outside the rules, Tarantino doesn't just break them, he makes his own. And that kind of boldness is rare, powerful, and honestly, really refreshing.
There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
And this is exactly why Bill Maher respects Quentin Tarantino, because he's one of the few people on the left who's not afraid to call out the craziness happening on his own side. Tarantino speaks the truth without holding back, and Maher sees that as a rare and valuable trait in today's Hollywood, which has slowly moved away from creativity and storytelling and become more focused on pushing ideology and fake wokeness. A clear example of this is the failed Snow White reboot, which flopped both with critics and at the box office, mainly because the filmmakers cared more about looking virtuous than telling a good story. They even chose not to cast real little people as the Seven Dwarves, using CGI instead, claiming it was to avoid stigma. But all it really did was take jobs from actors who have proudly played those roles for years. That's not being progressive, it's being condescending. And it's exactly the kind of nonsense that both Tarantino and Maher aren't afraid to speak out against.
You bullish on the future movies? Because...
Well, look, you have to always look at...
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happens... This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves, all right? So it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s, all right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And then to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Okay, Let's pause for a moment because Tarantino made a really interesting point. He talked about the Hays Code, a set of moral rules from the 1930s that Hollywood used to censor anything seen as too risky, especially sexual content, before movies were even shown to the public. And back then, many people saw it as a serious threat to free speech and creative freedom, a way to clean up art just to fit moral standards. But here's the twist. Tarantino believes that kind of censorship is making a comeback. Only now it's not from the government or some official board. It's coming from always angry social justice warriors and online mobs who use cancel culture to attack any movie or director. That doesn't repeat their views. Instead of judging films by how creative or meaningful they are, people now rate them based on how closely they match current social beliefs. Directors are scared to be bold, writers hold back, and studios give in to outrage on Twitter. And this new form of censorship, dressed up as progress, is just as dangerous as the old Hays Code ever was.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood
Bonnie
comes
and
out.
Clyde.
Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically the 80s part 2, what we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part of it.
Now here's something interesting. Tarantino actually thinks Hollywood is beginning to clean itself of the whole woke culture. And if that's true, then honestly, all I can say is finally, because it's been a long time coming. This wave of fake wokeness hasn't just been tiring. It's felt completely suffocating. So many modern movies feel less like entertainment and more like lectures with boring stories, as if creativity has been replaced by checklists and forced political correctness. If Tarantino's right and we're heading toward a reset, then I'm all in, because a new golden age of Hollywood that focuses on strong characters, powerful stories, and real emotion instead of empty ideological messages would be amazing. Imagine movies that truly entertain us, challenge us, and make us think without trying to preach. That's the kind of Hollywood we all fell in love with. And if this cultural reset is actually happening, then maybe the future of film is something to get excited about again. But during his chat with Joe Rogan, Tarantino also made a pretty disturbing point. So, take a look.
And then there's like, okay, this guy or this woman is going to write a think piece in the New Yorker about my movie, or in the Los Angeles Times, or in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website. And they're going to go against it and talk about, oh, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision, or Quentin has become right wing, and this movie has a right wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton as a fucking hippie. That's how it's.
Is that really a take that someone had that you've become right wing because of a character in a film?
Even like a critic who liked it, A.O. Scott, goes, well, this whole vision seems more on the right than you would imagine.
It might sound crazy, but it actually happens more often than you'd expect. A lot of people, especially those on the left, tend to view every movie through a heavily political lens. And the moment they notice even the slightest hint of right-leaning themes or conservative ideas, they completely lose it. Suddenly, it's not just a film anymore. It becomes a threat, and they go on full-blown rants attacking the movie, the cast, the writers, and anyone involved just for expressing values that don't match their own beliefs. Forget is that cinema isn't supposed to be an ideological echo chamber. Movies are artistic reflections of society, its dreams, its flaws, and its contradictions. They're meant to be mirrors, not mouthpieces, and not every film will match your personal views, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, that's what makes art powerful. It challenges, it provokes, and yes, sometimes it even offends. But to reject a movie just because it doesn't cater to your politics is completely missing the point.
It doesn't necessarily make it wrong, make it bad, but it just seems like more on the right. Well, Rick is coming from a place more on the right, not me.
Yeah.
Per se, but I am telling the story through Rick's point of view. And then, they say something, well, how come they don't talk about, how come there aren't more black characters in the movie? How come they don't talk about the Vietnam War more? Well, basically, the movie takes place between 2 days. Okay, well, they didn't bump into Jim Brown, right, on those 2 days. All right, they saw who they fucking saw. during those 2 days. Well, they didn't have a conversation about Vietnam in those 2 days. I can't just deal with all the hot button issues if I'm set up in a thing between 2 days. Oh, Margaret Robbie doesn't talk enough. She spends the entire movie by her fucking self. I could have given her if you were just counting lines, I could have put Mr. Saperstein in the car, with her dog, and she could have just been having a running commentary with her dog about picking up Roman's dry cleaning and getting the book, and maybe I'll go see the movie. And that would have actually taken care of the line count, but it would have been bullshit.
Exactly. Time social justice warriors and overly sensitive critics realize a simple truth. Not every movie is made to push a message. Some films are created purely for entertainment, for escape, for fun, and that's completely valid, while others are meant to explore serious and controversial topics. And both types deserve a place in cinema. Not every film has to carry the burden of a moral mission, and people often forget that directors are storytellers with unique visions, and those visions don't always reflect their personal beliefs. Instead, they're about exploring different characters, perspectives, or situations. But when filmmakers are pressured to force social messages into stories where they don't naturally fit, it's not progress. It's artistic sabotage, because pushing political or cultural agendas that clash with the story's heart weakens the message and kills the film's beauty. Truly great movies stick with us not because they preach, but because they move us through honest storytelling, deep characters, real emotion, and authenticity. So let art be art.
Doesn't it seem like part of the problem is just that it came out during the time where Trump was president, and that's one of the reasons why these political takes on things, like that he's more to the right, or I can't imagine that anybody would think that you're leaning right now, that Quentin is becoming right because your character is. That seems so stupid, but it's more of it's just a statement about the politicalization of everything.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're correct. And the thing about it, though, is, look, those kind of academic college think pieces, they're just fine. Like in a college situation, they make sense. I can take a book or a movie and come up with some argument that goes, that's like that's more of a subtextual argument about a film. That doesn't mean I'm right, but it means I can make my little argument,
right?
For the course. But it doesn't. But I have no illusions that that's what the director was thinking about. And ultimately, when it comes to subtextual criticism, it doesn't matter. It's simply you making your little case. But in the heat of the moment, they're actually treated more seriously than that.
How do you parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film? Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are, all right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and where they're talking.
Here, Tarantino makes a strong and important point. Everyone has the right to their own opinion, including critics, because free speech isn't one-sided. It applies to everyone, no matter their political views, and he fully understands that not every viewer will enjoy his work, and that's totally okay. In fact, he welcomes criticism as part of being an artist. But what he doesn't accept is when that criticism turns personal and hateful, when people attack him, call him names, or try to cancel him just because he wrote a book or made a film that happens to connect with a right-leaning audience. That's where it crosses the furrow. Tarantino doesn't make movies to please everyone. He makes them to tell stories, to challenge people, to make them think. So sure, criticize the movie if it's not for you and disagree with the message if you want, but don't turn the artist into a political target or trash his name just because he won't follow the crowd. That's not real criticism. That's censorship hiding behind fake outrage.
You parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film. Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are, all right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and where they're talking about. But within 3 paragraphs, I see where this guy or woman is coming from, and they either like my stuff or they don't like it.
Right.
And if they're inclined to like my stuff and they go negative on it, that's interesting. to see what it is that did that. I mean, a lot of the critics that like me didn't like Hateful Eight. It all came down to the fact that it was just too rough a vision for them. It was just too cynical. It was too cruel. And that's one of my favorite movies, because I feel like, wow, that's the Sam Peckinpah movie I always wanted to make. It's a fucking cruel, pitiless vision. But it's called The Hateful Eight. The idea is there's no good guys in the movie.
In the end, Tarantino's view is a refreshing reminder that true art isn't made to please everyone. It's meant to provoke, entertain, and show life in all its messy complexity. And he's one of the few voices in Hollywood who hasn't given in to the pressure of fitting into ideological rules, earning respect even from his toughest critics. Like Bill Maher, whether he's pointing out the silliness of woke culture or standing up for creative freedom, Tarantino believes filmmakers should be free to tell their stories without fearing cancellation. Not every movie has to push a political message, and not every director should be judged by one. And maybe Hollywood is finally waking up from its fake woke phase. If that's true and we're entering a new era of bold, honest storytelling, then I'm all for it. Because art thrives when free expression rules, not when political tests decide what's worth watching. So if Tarantino is right and Hollywood is shaking off its woke coma, then we might be in for a real cinematic comeback. No more boring lectures, no forced agendas, just great stories. And that's the Hollywood we really need. If you're done with the nonsense and ready for honest talk, hit that subscribe button and stick around. You won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.